When you think of the translation, the result now, you have God's Word that has been published. Go back to the beginning. What was your process? How did you balance the scientific study of language with the theological goal of sharing God's Word and the love of God? You had a process there.
God, in His own way, brought some men together at Concordia Theological Seminary, got me into a room, and asked me the question about Bible translation, and I got up to the board and started drawing lines and showing that none of the English ones really were as accurate as they should be according to the original, and none of the English ones we had now were really natural, totally natural, the way we spoke English today. And finally they said to me, now, if we're going to do that kind of a translation, what is it going to take to do it? And I knew now I could put this to rest from my perspective. As I said to them, well, it's going to take 5 people, with PhDs, people that really know the Greek, people that really know the Hebrew, people that know Aramaic, people that are theologians. We're going to have at least a team of 5 good translators. We're going to have some people that are specialists in English, readability consultants and reviewers who can really do this review for naturalness. Then finally one of them, who was a Fortune 500 owner, said, well, what's that going to cost? And that's what I was waiting for, really, because I figured this could put this to sleep real quick. And I said to him, I would suggest it's going to cost $5 million at the minimum. And that turned those people on. It means now that we're going to make available to these translators computers. It was just at that time when the computer was really coming in. And we need to have these people connected with the Louvre, that is in Paris. We're going to have them connected with the British Museum. We're going to have them connected with the Vatican in Rome, the Sistine Chapel, and all those books that there are down there. We need them connected with the best places in the world to be able to get all the best information, not only about those ancient texts. We've talked about the source, but we need to understand what was the culture around that source, so that when we're making exegetical decisions, we make them in terms of the context in which those original documents were written. So they said, well, yes, that's good. And then I said, in addition to the translators, you've got to realize when one of those translators has translated the text, and now we're going to get to the process, one of the translators would be assigned to, say, the book of Genesis. That translator would work at all the kind of information he needed from the source, language, and culture in order to do the best possible translation of that book into the English language, which was Genesis. Then we took that first draft, turned that over to an English reviewer. And an English reviewer, they would be ruthless, because they could take their red pen and they'd say, that's not how anybody says it today. That's not how they do it. 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 And that was their main job initially, is to point out where the problems were. Then we teamed that translator up with that particular reviewer that had done this thing, and we said, all right, now you people work out a second draft together. And you translator, you have to take very seriously everything that this English reviewer has said to you. At the same time, you English reviewer, you can't insist on your way at the expense of the source meaning. So they did this balancing act then. Closest natural equivalent. First equivalent, and is natural, and then the closest possible one that we can get. Then it was given to the peers. Now what do I mean by peers? The peers were the 5 translators and the 3 English reviewers. Those were part of the full-time team. And so all of them would get that Genesis then, both the translators and the English reviewers. And they would go through it. And they would say, this is something we got to look at here. This is something. The meaning might have been compromised a little bit here. Or this is still not natural English here. And then it was adjusted at that point. Most usually there wasn't a lot to do, but there was some adjustment made. Then it was sent to the technical team. Technical team was pastors out in the field, college professors, seminary professors. You look at this thing. And they were really supposed to be looking at it in terms of, is the source language being dealt with well? But, most of them are normal American English speakers. So when we told them, You can mark things that don't seem natural to you in English and aren't clear to you in English. They did that. So then when that came back, then we had what we called the Book Review Committee. And that wouldn't be all 5 of the translators, it wouldn't be all 3 of the reviewers. At that point, somebody like myself got a little bit involved already, but it would be a team to put that book in the best possible way we could. Then it went out to the Consultative Committee. That was a group of 50 people, and they were taken out of all kinds of different denominations, different points of view. And here's where we dealt with this potential, sometimes subjectivity that could come in. If someone, for instance, was a Christian that didn't believe in infant baptism, maybe he would, subconsciously, unconsciously, not intentionally, adjust the text a little bit, or another way. But when you had this group of people that came out of various denominations, good scholars, all of them recognized people, 50 of them, go through this thing, then you'd get the comments back, sometimes comments of that kind. But because the translators and the reviewers knew that was going to happen, they were not as liable to be subjective. They were objective, really, all the way along. And so then it came back from them, then it went to the, adjusted again, then it went to the final Editorial Committee. That was a committee that I served on much at that point. I was a consultant all the way along the way, but then I came into the thing more fully. And finally, then it was adjusted. That 5th draft, really, was then what was sent for typesetting, and that's how we get this.